Breaking tonight, Canada and Australia quietly build a new, trusted, critical mineral supply chain. While Washington talks tariffs, this alliance is already wiring the future of green energy. Breaking tonight, the global mining industry just shifted beneath Washington's feet. Canada didn't wait for permission. They built the future. Two of the world's most resource-rich nations just rewrote the rules for critical minerals. While America was distracted by tariff threats and trade wars, everyone believed the United States would dominate the green energy supply chain. Wall Street expected American companies to control lithium and rare earth markets. Defense analysts assumed Washington would lock down battery metal partnerships first. They were all catastrophically wrong. Toronto, early March 2024. Inside the Prospectors and Developers Association conference, something happened that barely made headlines. Canadian natural resources officials and Australia's critical mineral office sat down and signed a joint statement. No television cameras, no presidential photo ops, just signatures on paper and a quiet handshake that would ultimately reshape the architecture of 21st century energy security. Translation. While Trump was threatening tariffs, Mark Carney was building the infrastructure that makes tariffs irrelevant. And what happened next? The alliance that invested in transparency and technical excellence reveals exactly why Canadian strategic positioning is accelerating while American leverage quietly erodes. Dear viewers, between March 2024 and November 2025, something extraordinary happened in global resource relationships. Washington threatened, Ottawa delivered, and Australia, patient professional Australia, became the partner. Every forward-thinking nation started calling first. Let me paint you a picture. While American politicians were arguing about who could be tougher on trade, Canadian engineers were on video calls with Australian geologists at 2 a.m., mapping out lithium deposits in Ontario. While Washington debated another infrastructure week, Perth and Toronto were signing the actual contracts, $28 billion US, not promises, not press releases, real investment flowing across the Pacific, building the supply chains that will power electric vehicles for the next generation. Here's what's revolutionary about this moment. The money isn't sitting in bank accounts or government projections. By mid-2025, Australian direct investment in Canada reached 28.5 billion Canadian dollars, placing Australia among Canada's top 3 mining stakeholders, right behind the United States and the United Kingdom. But the amount itself isn't the story. The texture of that investment is what changes everything. Walk through Toronto's financial district today. You'll see something Washington missed entirely. New smelters going up in Quebec, automated mining trucks being tested in Sudbury, research laboratories filled with engineers who left fossil fuel projects to work on green metals. Australian capital isn't just buying mineral rights in Canada, it's building completely new value chains that bypass American middlemen entirely. Think about what this actually means. For 20 years, everyone assumed critical mineral processing would flow through either American ports or Chinese refineries. Those were the only 2 options on the table. Ottawa and CRA just created a third option, and they did it while America's political class was obsessed with who could sound tougher at campaign rallies. There's a company called Wu Metals, Australian firm. They're building Canada's first mine to cathode battery hub in Sudbury. When it's operational, it will process enough nickel for hundreds of thousands of electric vehicles annually. Not American electric vehicles necessarily, European electric vehicles, Asian electric vehicles, vehicles built by companies that are tired of supply chain uncertainty and political volatility. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Another Australian company, Vital Metals, Rude Rare Earth, processing away from Chinese facilities and into Canadian hands. Think about the geopolitical implications for a moment. For 2 decades, Beijing controlled 90% of rare earth refining. That single choke point gave China extraordinary leverage over every technology company, every defense contractor, every renewable energy manufacturer on the planet. Ottawa and Canberra just demonstrated that choke point can be bypassed. Not with sanctions, not with tariffs, with infrastructure and partnerships between countries that actually trust each other. Most analysts are still writing about American supply chain dominance like it's 2015. If you're one of the few actually watching these shifts happen in real time, you're already seeing a different world than most people. You know what Washington was doing during the same period? threatening Canada with auto tariffs, demanding Mexico renegotiate trade terms, tweeting about making allies pay for security. And while that theater played out, the actual architecture of economic power was being rewired by policymakers who understand that 21st century strength comes from reliability, not threats. Let me give you the numbers that should terrify American strategists. Canada pulled in a record 85.5 billion Canadian dollars in foreign direct investment in 2024. Mining was at the absolute core of that surge. BHP's Jansen Potash project alone is supporting thousands of jobs, but the ripple effects tell you everything about where real economic momentum is building. Indigenous communities across Canada are securing new training programs and partnership deals with Australian mining firms. Data engineers in Ontario are writing artificial intelligence code for autonomous mining fleets. Australian equipment suppliers are booking their busiest years in a decade. This isn't government make work. This is real skills development, real job creation, real economic leverage being built from the ground up. And here's what makes this alliance fundamentally different from American trade relationships right now. There's no coercion involved, no threats, no ultimatums. Ottawa isn't demanding Australia buy Canadian wheat or face consequences. Canberra isn't threatening Canada with mineral export restrictions unless they toe the line. They're building mutual prosperity through transparent partnerships, and the rest of the world is watching very carefully. By November 2025, European tech giants are knocking on Ottawa's doors. London is negotiating co-investment frameworks. Brussels is exploring supply chain guarantees. Even Singaporean sovereign wealth funds are scouting Canadian infrastructure deals, betting that what they're calling the Commonwealth Corridor will become the most stable mineral supply network on the planet. Think about what that means for American influence. For 70 years, Washington's great advantage was being the reliable partner, the stable democracy, the place where international capital felt safe. That advantage is evaporating in real time. And it's not because of military threats or diplomatic failures. It's because reliability matters more than rhetoric. And right now, Ottawa is demonstrating reliability, while Washington demonstrates volatility. There's a phrase I keep thinking about. Real change is often invisible until suddenly it isn't. The Canada-Australia Mining Alliance is the perfect embodiment of that principle. For years, mining partnerships meant photo opportunities and policy white papers that led nowhere. Now they mean actual infrastructure functioning supply chains and new economic networks humming beneath the headlines that American media never bothers to cover. Let me ask you something. Who would you trust to run the world's critical supply chains? The country threatening auto tariffs one, weak and demanding loyalty the next, or the partnership that's quietly building battery processing facilities, rare earth refineries, and AI-powered mining opium rations without making threats or demanding submission? The answer is becoming obvious to every major economy, except apparently the United States. Washington won't say this out loud yet, but economic power doesn't come from threats anymore, not from tariffs. It comes from actually building things, infrastructure, technology, trust. Canada and Australia get this. America is still arguing about the 1980s. November 2025, over $10 billion in projects under construction right now. By 2030, they're projecting 40 billion Canadian dollars. Every single week brings another software partnership, another logistics upgrade, another cross-Pacific training program. This isn't speculation. This is infrastructure being built right now, while American politicians argue about whether tariffs should be 10% or 25%. And here's the implication that should concern every American watching this. While Washington stumbles from one trade threat to another, Ottawa is quietly building the platforms and protocols for what comes after. Lithium processing in Ontario, integrated battery zones in Western Australia, AI workforce exchanges, transparent regulatory frameworks that make long-term investment actually possible. You know what Trump's response has been to all of this? More threats, more tariffs, more demands that Canada bow to American priorities. And you know what Mark Carney's response has been? Building partnerships with countries that actually want to cooperate instead of dominate. There's something almost poetic about how unglamorous this transformation looks from the outside. No viral summit photos, no flag-waving spectacles. The story lives in spreadsheets, shipping manifests, and hiring notices for mining. engineers. But in a world obsessed with spectacle and theater, the quiet alliances are the ones that actually reshape economic geography. Let me bring this full circle. What started as a polite agreement in a Toronto conference room now underpins a whole new phase of global stability built on transparency, technology, and mutual self-interest rather than threats and coercion. To me, this is the most important economic story that American media is completely ignoring. It's proof that, in a noisy world, the most consequential moves are often the most understated. And the best alliances aren't necessarily the loudest, but the ones that leave the world a little less dependent on American approval. You want to understand where real economic power is flowing right now? Watch where the infrastructure investments go. Watch where the training programs get built. Watch where sovereign wealth funds are parking long-term capital. And right now, all of those indicators are pointing to partnerships like the Canada-Australia Mining Alliance, not to Washington's threats and tariff announcements. Because at the end of the day, countries can choose their partners. And increasingly, they're choosing reliability over dominance. They're choosing Mark Carney's approach over Donald Trump's approach. They're choosing the future being built in Toronto and Perth over the past being defended in Washington. If you found this analysis valuable, I want to point you toward our previous video on Sweden's resource strategy under Carney's influence. It's part of the same pattern, the same quiet rewiring of economic power that's happening while America debates tariffs. The link is below. Look, if you're trying to figure out where the world is actually heading, not where the headlines say it's heading, that's exactly what we do here at Canada Next. No comfortable stories, no safe predictions, just what's really happening while everyone else watches. The theater. I appreciate you being here. Seriously, most people are watching the circus. You're not. See you in the next one.